This is the Roller Coaster Podcast, and I'm your host, Lucy Q. Life is a wild ride. It has twists and turns. It's scary, exciting, and downright fun. So throw your head back, arms in the air, and come along with me for the ride.
Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. I wanna ride.
Episode 200 of the roller coaster will soon be here, and this is your chance to be part of the fun. I'm going to be recording this episode with coaches and listeners just like you. If you want to be part of the fun, head over to nectargrowth.com. Sign up for free and RSVP for the November 18th event. All of the details will be under the events tab. I can't wait to see you there. What are you waiting for? Come join us. You know you're worth it.
Ride.
We're all unique, with our own set of blueprints that shape our experiences, and it's the foundation for our individual expression. But what happens if you lose connection to your blueprints or never remember having them in the first place? Joining me today is Rebecca Roberts of Inner Architecture to share how we can declutter our minds and reestablish a connection with our inner selves. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, madam. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me. And as you said, it's actually later in the evening for you because you're in Switzerland.
Switzerland, yes.
I think it is our first guest from Switzerland on the podcast.
Wow, fantastic. We stand neutrally happy to greet you.
So tell me, what was the catalyst for you to start exploring the connection with the inner self?
So let's see. My background is actually in interior design and architecture. So this is also where this name comes from, because I was always fascinated with the way that different spaces around us make us feel. The experience that we have when we're with certain people or when we enter a certain type of space. And this was always something that intrigued me. My father was a cabinet builder, and so I was always in different types of spaces with him as he was installing cabinets and doors and stairs. And as I grew up, I had a very clear concept of what it meant to be an adult. This is kind of the checklist of, okay, you've got the right partner, check. You've got the right house. You have the right amount of money. You in this case, live in the right country now. What's the story? And I had a pretty damn good checklist, and I had it all checked off. And there still felt like there was something missing. And I have a very curious mind. It's always been this way since the time that I was little. And so I went on a bit of a hunt, and I realized that so much of the focus had always been on the exterior, how the exterior makes us feel. And when I started learning how to flip that lens and starting to see that actually, and this is where the name comes from, the stability that I had extraneous or exterior of all of the things that were around me. I was using all of that as my stability, but I hadn't cultivated an inner stability. I hadn't paid attention to the architecture on the inside, the resilience, the stillness, the self-trust, all of these aspects that, in all honesty, that is the piece that coming to the realization of, all of the stuff around me can be supportive. Absolutely. Not to say that if you are surrounded by beautiful people in an inspiring space, yeah, totally, that does open up something in us, but it doesn't open something that's not already there. And so gaining access to that became this deep, curious passion. And as I unlocked more and more, it became just the overflow of sharing what I was learning with so much excitement, probably too much at first.
I can 100% relate to your story. The only difference is it, while you got curious and started to explore, I kept pushing it aside, assuming that there was something wrong with me, because we keep going back to that dreaded checklist. I'd still like to know who wrote it, because they deserve
And
they deserve a slap. But I went through the same thing where you're going through the motions, you're doing all of these things. Nobody talked about purpose, nobody talked about passion. It was always this rote list of to-do items that you have to get through in life. And you're right, we are given what we're told is a clear picture of being an adult. But then you get to an adult, or in my case, halfway through being an adult, and you're like, what the heck? Like, what is this all about?
oh yeah.
So, and I'm not saying necessarily if you have an answer for this, but I can't help but wonder, has it always been this way? Is there something different about society where we are right here, right now, that more people are beginning to question, that they just kind of followed along and never thought to ask any differently? Like, how do we get so far off track?
Do you know, I believe there are a few different aspects to this. And yes, I do believe that, I mean, we are in easily one of the absolute most prosperous, peaceful times that the world has ever seen. And I know it doesn't feel like that, but if we look back at previous generations, at least in the West, and there are loads of people that are still struggling to put food on the table, and to feel safe and secure. But as a whole, the world is at one of its most peaceful states that it's ever been. And so as a result, there is more space and more time to explore, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, when we know that we can at least find some food, we generally have some shelter over our heads, we feel safe enough, we feel secure enough, that oftentimes now there begins to be a bit of space to look at these things. And I would say as well, as the world opens up more and more, we see more things that are really confusing and contradictory. And hopefully, in many of us, it's triggering this little, that little,
or what the
yeah, exactly. That little voice inside that even before judgment comes, that little something is off. It is that root of intuition. And I am convinced that intuition comes before any judgment, right? There's nothing attached to it. It is just more of a move left. That's interesting. It's bringing our attention and our awareness to certain different places of going, okay, can I pause for a moment and stop and see that something is off here? And I don't know what that is. And with the time, I will say we also are in one of the most distracted times. And so we have a lot of mechanisms to avoid being quiet and still with ourselves. This is also something very, very interesting. So, I believe that we are in a time as well that, you see it coming in every type of music. You see mindfulness, awareness, you see it coming up with sports, you see it coming up in every different area. The awareness that, wow, awareness actually is quite a powerful thing. It may seem overly simple, but when we see more, we have more power to act on what we see. You can't do anything with what you don't know exists. And so this is such a powerful thing. And I believe that there is such a thing as maybe collective conscious, that, when one thing happens on one end of the world, it's crazy how the whole thing is kind of raising up in certain ways.
That makes a lot of sense. And I sort of look back at my family heritage, and my parents were born at the end of or just after World War II. And I
Mm.
think back to the life that they lived. And it was very insular because you pretty much only kept to either your family or the people on the street. What you learned was either taught in school, a book you read, or what was in the newspaper or on the radio. And I compare that to where we are today, where we are on information overload. We
Mhm.
have, I mean, we have iWatches and iPhones and iPads, and they're all like buzzing and beeping and carrying on at some point in time. So, that contributes to the distraction. But I can see, on the other hand, how something as simple as podcasting and YouTube, we get to see hundreds of thousands of different ways that people live their life. And it's almost giving us permission to look and go, well, wait a second. I don't have to be a storekeeper or a garbage collector like my father grandfather was. Look at all these other opportunities that are out there. So that kind of throws us in a bit of a push and pull, because we see everything that's possible, but then we're so cluttered and it just kind of compiles on itself.
Oh, amen to that, man. And that's it's so interesting. And this is also part of the challenge and the opportunity, right, of all of this information, is that there is such a wealth out there, and it can also be crazy overwhelming as we're just thinking, well, I could actually do so many things. What is it that I choose to do? On the flip side, sometimes we get these little glimpses of realizing, oh my gosh, I can give myself permission to be as I am. I can remember at some point in time reading a book from Glennon Doyle, and it's called Untamed. And as I'm reading it, she's talking about a characteristic about herself, that she's not the best friend. Like sometimes she feels like, I'm a bad friend. I don't like the pressure and the expectation that so many women especially come with when it comes into friendship. And I'm reading it thinking, oh my gosh, I feel so much that way. I feel so much pressure because I am, like, when I am face to face with somebody, I am 100% present. When it comes to texting and things, I am so bad sometimes. And I am so grateful for my amazing, beautiful friends that are like, yeah, so I decided to call because I left you a voice message 3 days ago and you still haven't looked at it. So I know that you still love me, but yeah, I need an answer for whatever it was today. I'm like, I love you. Thank you for loving me so well. But I had beat myself up so much for this. And now it's a dialogue that I've actually had with many of my friends to say, look, this is not one of my strengths, and I'm looking to do it better. But I want to clarify that I have so much love for you. I'm just not the best in like all the digital communication. And that has opened up doors in friendship, and it has healed some old wounds that I didn't even know existed, of people going, wow, yeah, I thought you were just blowing me off on a pretty consistent basis. It's like, oh God, no. So sometimes we get these little glimpses from the outside and we go, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one. I'm not crazy. And we begin to take ownership of these aspects of ourselves that might be kind of messy or chaotic.
And it's funny you said that, because it's something that I've always just thought about myself, that I don't like. When my girlfriend's in town, she lives in a different city, and we get together, we get along like a house on fire.
Yeah.
But like texting every day or calling, stuff like that, it's just not my thing.
Yeah.
It's not. I mean, we have adult kids and they live in a different city, so I'm always sort of texting with them. But it's like when I get in my little zone, kind of forget that other things exist. And I just
Absolutely.
thought I carried guilt. So thank you for bringing that up as an example, because now it's like, oh, okay. Other
Yeah.
people are like this too. It's not just me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's the types of things that we can hold ownership, and we can still work on doing them better, or in a way that honors more what we would like to create. And this is kind of this little paradox of, can I hold full ownership for how I am in this moment, and love myself with all my messy funkiness? And can I also recognize that in my next step, there is the potential to do it slightly differently, slightly in a way that feels maybe a little bit more aligned? Because I am messy, and I've learned to actually kind of love that messiness. It's actually, and one of the things, I realized whenever you were saying it afterwards, it makes it sound like I just went straight from, the checklist to curiosity. There was a whole lot of mess that led to the curiosity as well. I mean, to the point of being diagnosed bipolar, because there were then at some point in time, two very different people living inside of me at the same time. The one who thought the checklist was exactly what it needed to be an adult, and the one that was very certain that fun can absolutely be a value. And even though everybody says that there's no way, I believe that fun and play can totally be values. And they were clashing. And so it was, how do I come to peace between these two sides of myself, or I'm much more schizophrenic than that, between all of the sides of myself? And that's why I love the name of your podcast, this roller coaster aspect, because man, it can shake us up a whole bunch. But in all honesty, I'm very grateful for that shakeup, because it loosened and brought to the top a whole lot of things that were really good to make peace with.
And for me, the shakeup, I call it, well, it was a crisis. For me, it was scraping the bottom of shit barrel. That's just how I describe it.
Amen.
But that was the catalyst of complete transformation and change. I always joke that I'm a slow learner. It has to be really painful before I actually clue into what I'm supposed to be doing. But it was through that pain that led to the self-discovery, that led to the growth, that led to where I am today and where I'll be tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
And I just think, as for that checklist, I think just like women in the 70s burned their bras, I think it's time that we start burning this checklist, because I'm done with it. And I'm tired of seeing people chase it and knowing. And I look at some people, and you must go through this too. It's kind of like, it's like if you ever quit smoking, if you smoked and you quit smoking, you suddenly notice all the smokers.
Yeah.
Well, it's looking back and you're noticing all these people that are just, and I'm not trying to be unkind, but they're sheeple. They're just following that list because they haven't yet realized that they actually get to write the list themselves. It's not what society is telling us.
Amen. So true. So, well, and this is the thing, you can only recognize sheeple when you've been one. Right? Like, I mean, this is so that's exactly it. This is where we bring the compassion, is that it takes one to know one, man. And I was fully in there. I was so invested in this concept, in this idea. I truly believed, because it was all that I had seen again and again and again. And those crazy ones, those outliers, right? Those are the lunatics. We don't want to be like them. And then all of a sudden you start to find your bridges, the things that allow you to connect where you have been, because it's also not the concept of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, right? There are beautiful things actually to this list. But when you believe that it is the only thing that counts, you can still have vision and desire for what it is that you would like surrounding you. But when there's the concept or the idea that this is what will bring you satisfaction and happiness, this is where the conscious rebellion comes in, right? This is where it is about not just rebellion for rebellion's sake, not just putting up the dukes and saying, I'm going to fight everybody around, but to say more so inside of my own brain, what are the things that I truly believe? Versus what are the things that have either just been piled on top, or that I took on through the years from people that I love and admire, or maybe just that scared the shit out of me. And I thought, yep, okay, I'm going to follow you, because if I don't, I'm afraid of what happens. And then this is the whole point, is that we get the chance to start questioning, to start looking inside of our own minds, looking at the stories that we're telling and saying, like, really, what the fuck? Come on. Is that really the truth that I believe? Or is that just something that has been so hammered in? And what happens if I rebel against this? What happens if I choose to interrupt that pattern? What happens if I choose to experiment with believing something different? And there's some magic there.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier about possibly being diagnosed with being bipolar, and that resonated with me because although I fell into the trap of being one of those sheeple, I was born rebellious. That's just the way I was, because I don't like to be just told the way things are. It's like, okay, but I want to know it for myself. So I was always caught in this opposition of trying to fit in and then feeling the discomfort of trying to be something I'm not and being pulled back to the rebellious nature. So I kept bouncing back between being a sheeple and being the black sheep.
Oh,
I
nice.
kept
Yes.
going. And again, it was at that point of crisis where I said, I got to do this. I got to do this a different way. I got to do this differently. So why don't you share with us what the art of conscious rebellion is?
The art of conscious rebellion, the easiest access point that I have found when it comes to exploring our mindset is to look at the stories, to look at what are the stories that we tell ourselves about what we believe is possible, about the way that life works, about the way that we work. And these stories, oftentimes storytelling we think about is, my voice speaking out and my body language communicating, but the greatest narrators that all of us know are in our own heads, right? We have like epic storytellers in there. And this art of conscious rebellion is to use that same little skeptic that exists. And oftentimes I see so many people that say like, oh, I'm a realist, right? I'm skeptical. I take a moment and I try and really figure out whether or not this is true. And my thing is, well, if you're really going to be a balanced skeptic, then you also need to find what is true about the opposite of what you believe. Challenge your theories. And that's exactly what the art of conscious rebellion is that if your story is true, you can question it and you can experiment with it from every different angle, and it will hold, because what is true always, right? It will hold up against the test of time. But if just by some chance it's bullshit, if you start poking at it and you start questioning it and you start experimenting with its counterpoint, whether or not I'm capable of doing that. Can I stand in front of a crowd? Well, maybe I vomit in the backstage, maybe I'm terrified, but I did it. Okay, so that belief system isn't wholly right. It's not complete. It's scary, but I can do so much more than what I give myself credit for. So now this little rebel starts to come up, and instead of it being combative, it's curious. And so curiosity is really at the root of it. It is not about fighting who we are. This is not the type of rebellion that it is. Conscious rebellion is specifically to get really curious and to be willing to ask ourselves the tough questions like, is that really true?
And it takes a lot of courage to start walking down that path, because it is so unfamiliar and it may be completely different than what everyone around you is going through. And that can be a very scary place. But when you come through the other side, you have the benefit of being able to look back and see the path that you've created that other people can then potentially follow.
Totally. And the beautiful thing is that you get little gems along the way. Like, that's this whole process. And I won't say, disclaimer alert, this is kind of a tough thing. Seeing everything more clearly is not always easy, because sometimes it sucks to see that, like, I created what shit situation I'm in right now, right? Like, I was the one that made these choices to get me to where that doesn't always feel great. And sometimes the awareness of being in a tough situation and the awareness that I put myself here and I knew better can be like a double whammy. But this is where do we find, and this is a commitment to, do we find it worth it to see what is real? And that's a tough question. And sometimes, man, there have been days where I've had conversations with friends going, don't you wish sometimes you could just go back to not seeing? And yeah, there are times when, yeah, but along the way, you're given these little moments of, oh my gosh, so this is what it means to share honestly with somebody and get great feedback. And so it's not just when we get to the end of the road, but it can also be that along the way, we start to see the benefits of increasing that awareness, of building that inner stability, that we go, oh, okay, I might get knocked down, but I've seen it. I can get back up. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah,
That's
getting
really
knocked
cool.
down is almost like, okay, yeah, whatever. Yeah. It's just
Now.
like, it's just a snippet of time. It's good. It's good.
Absolutely.
But once you said about once you see it, you can't unsee it. For me, it's when you look at an optical illusion, if you only can see that one image, and then somebody points out to you, okay, well, if you look in the negative space, this is what you see, you can no longer look at that picture the same way. And that's what happens, is that once you start to notice, you start to look around and you get curious and you start creating the change and you break away from the norms, that's when you can't unsee. There's no going back. There's no going, as much as sometimes, yeah, it'd be easy to go back. And it's Les Brown that says, when you do what's easy in life, life will be hard. When you do what's hard, life will be easy. And it is a hard path, but life does get easier.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I absolutely love that. Yes.
So as we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts or words of wisdom that you want to share? And then also how people can connect with you?
Sure. Just on actually that topic that you just were speaking of, one of the things that I find so helpful is to look for some of the best examples to how to free our minds. And honestly, one of the best places that I see is children. Returning to that childlike simplicity of, it is not easy to be a kid. Like, you got to learn how to walk, you've got to process all of this stuff, but they do it with so much grace and so much patience for themselves. Like, if a little kid goes, screw it, I fell 5 times now, this whole walking thing, I'm out, I'm going to be crawling forever, I'm just done, but they don't. They keep trying and they keep trying and they keep trying. And that's one of the benefits as well, when they see, their older siblings or a cousin or something like this, is that we are gifted with people around us that are exploring all sorts of things. And so with that childlike curiosity, with that little spirit of rebellion, to look at life with wonder, and to be okay with all the things that we don't know, and to look at that as like, hey, this is stuff to discover about ourselves and about the world around us. I really find this to be a way to lighten up the intensity of this whole process of exploration and really the roller coaster. Yeah.
And how can people connect with you?
So probably easiest would be through my website, which is rebeccaroberts.com. There you can find something that I call Inner Architecture Minis. And this is little videos, normally between 2 and 4 minutes, but places where these little beautiful nuggets of conscious rebellion or of storytelling or mindset work, that's all there, just as little points of inspiration and a playground to get started.
If you're looking at connecting with Rebecca, make sure you check out the show notes. I'm going to have all of her links in there. And Rebecca, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your story.
I loved it. Thank you so much. It has been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Roller Coaster Podcast. Want to chat or share your ideas about today's show? Pop me an email at hello@therollercoasterpodcast.com. Don't forget to connect with me on Facebook and Instagram at The Roller Coaster Podcast. Our theme song, Roller Coaster, was performed by The Lucky Setback. Audio editing by the one and only Jeff Quigley of Quigley Creative.
Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. I wanna ride, 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 ride. Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. I wanna ride, 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 ride. Roller coaster. Ride, ride, roller coaster.